Picture this: a moonlit night in ancient Greece, deep within a sacred grove where torchlight flickers against the shadows of towering cypress trees. The air hums with whispered chants as robed figures move in solemn procession, their faces hidden behind masks of gods and monsters. This isn't just a ceremony, it's a gateway to the divine, a carefully guarded secret known only to those initiated into the mystery cults of Eleusis. For centuries, these rituals were the best-kept secrets of the ancient world, forbidden to speak of under penalty of death. But why? What profound truths or terrifying revelations were so powerful they had to be hidden away? The ancient Greek mystery cults weren't just religious gatherings. They were transformative experiences designed to unlock hidden layers of meaning about life, death, and the cosmos itself. Unlike the public temples where gods were worshipped openly, these clandestine rites offered something far more personal, a direct encounter with the divine, veiled in symbols, allegories, and rituals so potent that even today, scholars are still piecing together their true significance. Imagine standing in those torchlit halls, surrounded by chanting initiates, as priests revealed secrets that promised to rewrite your understanding of reality. What did they know that we've forgotten? That's exactly what we're about to uncover. Over the course of this journey, we'll unravel 30 hidden meanings buried within these ancient mysteries, from the surreal visions induced by sacred brews to the shocking parallels between these rituals and modern spiritual practices. We'll decode the cryptic symbols, explore the forbidden knowledge reserved for initiates, and even examine how these cults influenced everything from philosophy to early science. This isn't just history, it's a detective story, one where every clue leads us deeper into the minds of the ancients. So if you're ready to step into the shadows and uncover what was meant to stay hidden, let's begin. The first hidden meaning takes us straight to the heart of the Eleusinian Mysteries, where a simple sheaf of wheat held the key to understanding life's greatest paradox. At first glance, the grain rituals might seem like just another homage to Demeter, the goddess of agriculture. But dig deeper, and you'll uncover a symbolic language so profound it reshaped how initiates saw existence itself. Picture this: priests presenting a single stalk of wheat in total silence, a moment so charged that ancient writers called it the hierophany, the revelation of the sacred. This wasn't just about harvests, it was a mirror held up to the human soul. The myth of Demeter and her daughter Persephone, abducted to the underworld, then returning each spring, wasn't merely a story. It was a coded lesson in resilience. When Persephone vanishes, the earth withers. When she returns, life bursts forth anew. The grain, buried in darkness before sprouting anew, became the perfect metaphor. Initiates didn't just hear about rebirth, they held it in their hands, a tangible promise that death wasn't an end, but a transition. Ancient artifacts show this symbolism everywhere, from delicate gold leaves buried with initiates, inscribed with promises of eternal life, to frescoes where wheat stalks twist like serpents, linking earth and underworld. But here's the twist: the grain's power went beyond spirituality. It was also a political cipher. In a world where famine meant collapse, controlling the narrative of rebirth meant stability. The Athenian elite who oversaw the Eleusinian rites weren't just priests, they were puppet masters, using Demeter's myth to reassure a population dependent on erratic harvests. Yet for the average initiate, the message was deeply personal. Imagine a farmer kneeling in the torchlight, recognizing his own struggles in Demeter's grief, his buried seeds mirroring her hope. That's the genius of the mysteries. They made cosmic truths feel as close as the soil under your nails. Modern eyes might miss the radical edge here. Today, we separate science and spirituality, but the Eleusinians saw them as one. Their grain rituals predate modern botany by millennia, yet they grasped a truth we're still unpacking. Life depends on cycles of decay and renewal. It's no accident that later philosophers like Plato, rumored to be an initiate, used agricultural metaphors to explain the soul's journey. The wheat wasn't just a symbol, it was the first blueprint for the idea that nothing truly dies, it just changes form. And that revelation, handed down in hushed tones, might be why these rites were kept so fiercely secret. To know the grain's meaning was to stare into the abyss and smile. Now shift your gaze from the wheat fields of Eleusis to the shadowy caves where Orphic initiates gathered. Their rituals centered not on grain, but on something far more enigmatic, a cosmic egg. This wasn't just any egg. Crack open this symbol and you'll find the Orphic's entire vision of the universe. Imagine a luminous egg floating in primordial darkness, its shell splitting to release Phanes, the radiant, winged god of creation. To the Orphics, this wasn't mere mythology. It was the secret architecture of reality itself, a story whispered only to those deemed worthy. What makes this egg so extraordinary is how it weaves together science and spirituality. The Orphic creation myth begins with time Chronos coiling like a serpent around the egg until it hatches, birthing light, chaos, and order in one explosive moment. Sound familiar? It's eerily close to modern cosmology's Big Bang, a universe born from a singular, unimaginable rupture. But here's where it gets even stranger. Archaeologists have unearthed egg-shaped terracotta votives in Orphic sanctuaries, some inscribed with cryptic phrases like, "You will be God instead of mortal." These weren't just offerings, they were portable mysteries, physical reminders that every initiate carried a spark of the divine within them, waiting to hatch. The egg's symbolism also rippled across cultures, revealing a shared language of creation. In ancient Egypt, the primordial mound rises from the waters of Nun like an egg cracking open. Hindu texts describe the universe as Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg. Even the Phoenicians told of a cosmic egg split by the serpent Ophion. These parallels suggest something profound. The Orphics weren't just spinning tales. They were tapping into an archetype so universal it resonates across millennia. But why an egg? Think about what it represents: potential, transformation, the thin barrier between chaos and order. For Orphic initiates, cracking the egg's meaning was like holding the key to their own rebirth. Their rituals often involved symbolic deaths and resurrections, with the egg serving as a promise. Just as the cosmos emerged from fragmentation, so too could the soul shed its mortal shell. Gold tablets buried with devotees reinforced this, instructing the dead to recite passwords to the underworld gods, proving they'd learned the egg's secret, that death was merely a return to the source. The Orphic egg wasn't just a myth, it was a radical challenge to Greek religion's status quo. While mainstream cults worshipped Olympian gods, the Orphics turned inward, teaching that divinity wasn't just on Mount Olympus, it was coiled inside every person waiting to awaken. This idea would later electrify philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato, who saw the soul as a trapped spark yearning to return to the cosmic fire. Even today, the egg lingers in our collective imagination, from the world egg of medieval alchemy to the golden embryos of sci-fi lore. Some truths, it seems, refused to stay buried. Dionysian rituals were anything but orderly. They were a whirlwind of wine-drunk dancers, tambourines shaking like thunder, and barefoot maenads tearing through the forest under the cover of night. To outsiders, it looked like pure chaos, but beneath the frenzy lay a carefully orchestrated rebellion, a temporary dismantling of everything Greek society held sacred. The cult of Dionysus didn't just worship a god of wine. It weaponized ecstasy to crack open the rigid hierarchies of the ancient world. Imagine the shock of Athenian elites watching their wives and daughters, women who spent their days cloistered at home, suddenly sprinting up mountainsides, clutching live snakes, their hair wild, voices screaming in tongues. This wasn't just revelry, it was revolution in motion. The frescoes tell the story best. In Pompeii's Villa of the Mysteries, a sprawling mural shows initiates in the throes of transformation, one moment draped in fine robes, the next naked and writhing, their faces caught between terror and rapture. These weren't just party scenes, they were maps of liberation. Dionysus, often depicted as soft and effeminate in public art, here becomes a vengeful liberator, his followers shedding societal skins like serpents. For a culture obsessed with control of women, of slaves, of foreign barbarians, the cult offered a radical idea. What if the marginalized could, for one night, wield the power they were denied? But the rituals weren't just about breaking rules. They exposed a paradox at the heart of Greek civilization. The same society that praised rationality in philosophers like Aristotle also craved the raw catharsis of Dionysian frenzy. It's no coincidence that Euripides' The Bacchae ends in bloodshed. The play was a warning. When the king tries to suppress the Maenads, they tear him limb from limb, led by his own mother in a gruesome twist. The message: repress these primal forces at your peril. Modern parallels abound. Think of carnival traditions where servants mock kings, or even protest movements that use dance as defiance. The Dionysian cult's genius was turning ecstasy into a political act. By entering a trance, initiates didn't just escape society, they revealed its fragility. And that's why the rites were so feared. In a world where order meant survival, Dionysus whispered a dangerous truth: sometimes chaos is the only path to freedom. The Pythagoreans didn't just study numbers, they worshipped them, believing the universe was written in a secret language of shapes and ratios. At the heart of their teachings stood the tetractys, a triangle of 10 dots that wasn't just a mathematical curiosity but a roadmap to enlightenment. Picture this: initiates kneeling in dimly lit chambers, tracing the tetractys in the dirt as their teacher whispered its hidden meanings. To outsiders, it looked like simple arithmetic, but to those inducted into Pythagoras' inner circle, each layer of the triangle pulsed with cosmic significance. Start with the base, 4 dots representing the physical world: earth, air, fire, and water. Move upward, and the next 3 dots symbolize the human trifecta of body, mind, and soul. Higher still, 2 dots stood for the duality of male and female energies, until finally, the single dot at the apex revealed the ultimate truth: all existence sprang from divine unity. This wasn't abstract philosophy, it was a living, breathing code. Ancient texts describe initiates swearing oaths on the tetractys, calling it the spring of ever-flowing nature, a phrase that hints at its power to unlock the mysteries of creation. But the geometry didn't stop there. Pythagorean temples were built to mirror these sacred ratios, their floor plans echoing the tetractys' proportions. Archaeologists have found altars where the distance between columns matches the golden ratio, a mathematical constant that repeats in everything from spiral seashells to galaxy arms. Even the spacing of ritual fires followed precise geometric patterns, turning ceremonies into living equations. Imagine walking through one of these spaces, every step calculated to harmonize with the hidden order of the cosmos. The most startling revelation: these ideas weren't confined to temples. Pythagoreans saw geometry in music, discovering that plucking a string at specific fractions of its length produced perfect harmonies. They called it the music of the spheres, the belief that planets moved in celestial intervals, humming tones too profound for mortal ears. Modern science later confirmed their intuition. Astrophysicists now know planets emit electromagnetic vibrations, a cosmic symphony Pythagoras glimpsed 25 centuries ago. Yet for all its beauty, the cult guarded these secrets fiercely. Leak the wrong detail and you'd face expulsion, or worse. One legend tells of a disciple drowned at sea for revealing the existence of irrational numbers, a heresy that shattered their perfect numerical worldview. It's a grim reminder that to the Pythagoreans, geometry wasn't just study. It was sacred, dangerous knowledge, a knife's edge between revelation and ruin. Today, their legacy lingers in unexpected places. The tetractys hides in plain sight, from the triangular layout of Freemason lodges to the fractal patterns of modern sacred architecture. Even quantum physicists speak of a geometric universe where subatomic particles dance in shapes Pythagoras might have recognized. Perhaps that's the cult's greatest lesson. Sometimes the deepest truths aren't spoken aloud. They're drawn. Deep beneath the torchlight of Hecate's shrines, initiates performed a ritual that would make most shudder, a symbolic descent into the underworld, guided by the goddess who stood at the crossroads between life and death. Unlike the ecstatic chaos of Dionysian rites or the geometric precision of Pythagorean mysticism, Hecate's ceremonies were starkly personal, a confrontation with the one truth every human fears, mortality itself. Ancient curse tablets unearthed from Athens to Anatolia reveal the raw intimacy of these rituals. Scratched onto lead sheets in cramped, desperate handwriting, they invoke Hecate's triple form, maiden, mother, crone, not for blessings but as witnesses to the initiate's darkest reckonings. The statues tell the same story. Archaeologists have found Hecate's triple-faced figures planted at graveyard gates or crossroads, her three bodies fused back to back, each holding a torch, a key, or a serpent. These weren't just decorations, they were ritual anchors. Initiates would circle them counterclockwise, a deliberate unraveling of the sun's path, whispering prayers to the Queen of Ghosts as they spiraled deeper into trance. One 2nd century tablet from Cyprus spells it out. I bind my fear to Hecate's shadows that she may chew it to nothing. This wasn't worship, it was alchemy, turning terror into power through the goddess's jaws. What makes these descents so revolutionary is their brutal honesty. While Eleusis promised rebirth and Orphism offered divine eggs, Hecate's cult stared straight into the abyss. Participants didn't just hear about the underworld, they enacted it, fasting until their bodies trembled, then crawling through tunnels meant to mimic Hades' caves. Some tablets describe initiates biting into bitter herbs, likely hallucinogenic, to induce visions of the afterlife. The goal wasn't escape but mastery. A 1st century relief from La Jona shows this perfectly. A devotee kneeling as Hecate presses a skull into their hands, not as a threat but as a gift. To hold death was to disarm it. Modern psychology might call this exposure therapy, but the ancients saw it as sacred hacking. Hecate's triple form mirrored the journey's phases, the maiden's curiosity leading you in, the mother's strength sustaining you, the crone's wisdom bringing you back. Those who emerged spoke of an eerie calm, as if they'd smuggled a piece of the underworld into daylight. No wonder her cult flourished among outsiders, women, foreigners, even former slaves who knew life's fragility firsthand. In a world where fortune could vanish like mist, Hecate didn't offer empty comfort. She offered claws to grip the cliff's edge. The irony, these rituals may have birthed the earliest ghost stories. Roman poets wrote of Hecate's followers summoning spirits at moonlit crossroads, but the truth was subtler. After facing the underworld in ritual, initiates reported seeing shades everywhere, not as threats but as reminders. A 5th century vase painting captures this beautifully. A woman leaves Hecate's shrine, her face serene as a translucent figure brushes her shoulder. It's not horror, it's kinship. The dead weren't monsters, they were mirrors reflecting the initiate's own borrowed time. Hecate's genius was her refusal to sugarcoat. Where other mysteries dazzled with light, hers taught the sacredness of shadows. Today, her legacy lingers wherever people stare down their demons, whether in therapy offices or horror films that thrill us with fictional terrors. Because the real secret of Hecate's cult wasn't about conquering death. It was about learning to walk beside it, torch in hand, until the path no longer scared you. At the heart of Asclepius's healing sanctuaries, an unexpected creature slithered across marble-floor serpents coiled around staffs, draped over sleeping patients, even sipping from ceremonial bowls. To modern eyes, this might seem bizarre or frightening, but to ancient Greeks, these snakes were sacred surgeons, living symbols of rejuvenation. The cult of Asclepius didn't just tolerate serpents, they revered them as divine physicians, their very presence a conduit between the mortal and the miraculous. Walk through the ruins of Epidaurus, the most famous healing sanctuary, and you'll find stone reliefs showing snakes licking the wounds of the sick, their flickering tongues believed to transmit Asclepius's power. The logic behind this symbolism runs deep. Ancient observers noticed something extraordinary about snakes. They shed their skins, emerging shiny and renewed as if they'd cheated death. This wasn't just biology, it was theology in motion. The Asclepian at Pergamon took the metaphor further, where non-venomous snakes called Aesculapian snakes, named after the god's Roman counterpart, were kept in underground pits. Patients would descend into these dim chambers, lie on stone beds, and wait as the snakes glided over their bodies in a ritual called incubation, the goal to trigger a healing dream where Asclepius himself would appear, often in serpent form, prescribing cures. One surviving inscription tells of a man with a festering ulcer who dreamed the god snake licked his wound and woke to find it gone. But the serpent's role wasn't just mystical. Recent archaeology reveals practical genius at work. The Epidaurus sanctuary sat atop natural springs, their waters rich with sulfur, a known antiseptic. Snakes, drawn to the warmth, acted as early bioindicators. If they thrived, the waters were pure. Their presence also calmed patients. The rhythmic movement of their coils may have induced trance states, priming the mind for suggestion. Even the staff of Asclepius, entwined by a single serpent, encoded medical wisdom. Unlike the caduceus, a later mix-up with Hermes' staff, Asclepius's rod has no wings, just the snake, a silent nod to slow, deliberate healing versus quick-fix miracles. The legacy lingers in plain sight. Open any modern medical textbook, and you'll find the staff of Asclepius emblazoned on ambulances, hospital logos, and pharmacy signs. Yet few realize the symbol's roots in a time when healing was as much about psychological theater as herbal remedies. The Asclepian cult understood something we're only now rediscovering. The body heals better when the mind believes it can. Their serpents weren't just zoo exhibits, they were actors in a sacred drama. Their every flicker a reminder that renewal isn't just possible, it's woven into nature's design. Perhaps the most poignant evidence comes from votive offerings, tiny clay limbs and organs left by cured patients. Among these, archaeologists have found serpent figurines, some with human faces, as if the line between healer and healed had blurred. In the end, that may be the serpent's greatest lesson. True medicine doesn't just treat the body, it sheds old wounds like skin, leaving us startlingly new. High in the Cretan mountains, beneath the shadow of ancient symbols and flickering torchlight, the Corybantes performed their masked dances not as entertainment, but as a ritual so potent it could shake the sanity from a man's mind. These weren't mere performers, they were ecstatic warriors of the psyche, clad in bull masks and clanging bronze shields, their movements designed to induce trances so deep that initiates would collapse only to awaken reborn. Bronze Age frescoes from Knossos preserve their legacy, figures frozen mid-leap, their animal-headed disguises transforming them into something neither fully human nor fully divine. To witness their rites was to stand at the precipice of madness and revelation. The masks themselves held terrifying power. Carved from wood or molded from hardened leather, they distorted the wearer's face into exaggerated snouts and hollow, staring eyes. Archaeologists have found fragments of these masks in Cretan caves, their surfaces stained with ochre and charred from ritual fires. But here's the twist: the Corybantes didn't just wear masks, they became them. Ancient texts describe initiates losing their identities entirely during the dance, howling in tongues as the spirit of the bull god possessed them. One 2nd century account from a Greek traveler claims the dancers could channel the voices of long-dead ancestors, their words spilling forth like wine from a shattered jug. Why bulls? The answer lies in the cult's origin myth. The Corybantes were said to be the original protectors of the infant Zeus, drowning out his cries with their clamor so his father Cronus wouldn't find and devour him. Their dances reenacted this primal act of salvation, the thunder of shields mimicking the chaos of creation. the bull masks embodying raw, untamed life force. Later, these rituals evolved into a form of psychic surgery. Philosophers like Plato wrote of the Corybantes' ability to dance out madness, their rhythms syncing with the initiate's pulse until buried traumas erupted to the surface. Imagine a veteran of war trembling as the drumbeats match his heartbeat until the memory of battle spills from his lips in a torrent of screams and sobs. This wasn't exorcism, it was therapy millennia before the word existed. The psychological brilliance of these rites becomes clear when you examine their structure. Unlike the orderly procession of Eleusinian ceremonies, Corybantic dances followed a deliberate crescendo starting slow, then accelerating into frenzy before abrupt silence. Votive offerings found in Cretan shrines include tiny clay limbs, suggesting participants sought healing for both body and mind. But the most striking evidence comes from unexpected places. Mesopotamian cylinder seals and Hittite reliefs show strikingly similar bull-masked figures, hinting at a shared Bronze Age understanding of trance as a bridge between worlds. Modern neuroscience offers a fascinating lens on these ancient practices. The repetitive drumming, the hyperventilation from dancing, the flickering torchlight, all are known to induce altered states by overwhelming the brain's sensory filters. What the Corybantes called possession, we might now diagnose as a dissociative episode where the conscious mind steps aside to let buried wounds surface. Yet for all our clinical terminology, we've lost something crucial. The Corybantes didn't pathologize trauma, they ritualized it, treating the shattered psyche not as broken, but as sacred ground awaiting revelation. The mask's final secret lies in their impermanence. Unlike stone statues meant to endure, these ritual objects were often burned or buried after use, their power too volatile to leave intact. In a way, that's the ultimate metaphor for the cult's wisdom sometimes. Healing requires destroying the old self to make room for the new. Today, echoes of the Corybantes survive wherever rhythm is used to mend, from drum circles in veteran support groups to the cathartic mosh pits of punk concerts. The masks may have crumbled to dust, but the truth they embodied remains. Some transformations can only happen when we stop being human long enough to remember what else we might be. Beneath the vaulted ceilings of Mithraic temples, a secret celestial drama played out in stone. The god Mithras, knee pressed into the cosmic bull's back, dagger poised to strike, frozen in an eternal act that wasn't just myth but a star map in disguise. Every element of this tauroctony scene, from the scorpion gripping the bull's genitals to the dog and snake lapping at its blood, corresponds precisely to constellations visible in the night sky during the spring equinox 2 millennia ago. The bull, Taurus; the scorpion, Scorpius; the dog, Canis Minor. Even Mithras's flowing cape mirrors the billowing form of Perseus, as if the entire tableau were a divine punch card punched into the heavens. But this wasn't just artistic whimsy, it was a coded astronomical lesson. Ancient Mithraic temples, or Mithraea, were often built as subterranean replicas of the cosmos, their low, barrel-vaulted ceilings painted with stars to mimic the celestial sphere. Initiates would recline beneath these frescoes during rituals, their eyes tracing the same constellations that decorated the tauroctony relief before them. The alignment was deliberate. When the sun entered Taurus in the spring, Mithraic communities celebrated the Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun, marking the renewal of light over darkness. The bull-slaying scene thus became a cosmic clock, its violence symbolizing the sun's triumph over winter's grip. The genius of this symbolism lies in its layers. While surface-level viewers saw a heroic myth, initiates recognized an astrological allegory. The bull's blood, depicted as wheat sprouts in some reliefs, tied the scene to both fertility and the Milky Way, which ancient astronomers likened to a celestial river of life. Sol and Luna, often flanking the tauroctony, weren't just decorative, they represented the eternal balance of opposites, their presence anchoring the drama within the greater machinery of the cosmos. Even the dagger's position held meaning. In the Dendera zodiac from Egypt, a similar constellation map shows Taurus pierced by what scholars now identify as Orion's sword, suggesting Mithraism borrowed and repurposed older astral knowledge into its mysteries. Archaeology confirms this celestial link. At the Mithraeum of Santa Prisca in Rome, excavators found an inscription linking Mithras to the torchbearer of the eternal stars. Another site in Germany revealed a tauroctony with drilled holes where real gems might have marked key stars, turning the sculpture into a three-dimensional star chart. The cult's obsession with precision even extended to temple orientation. Most Mithraea face east, aligning with the sunrise during equinoxes when Taurus dominated the pre-dawn sky. Modern astronomers have run digital sky maps backward to verify these connections, confirming that the tauroctony's arrangement matches the night sky between 200 BC and 200 CE. But the Mithraic secret went deeper still. Some scholars argue the scene also encodes planetary movements. The bull's 7 wounds correspond to the 7 classical planets, while the twin torchbearers, Quartz and Quaterpates, one raising his torch, one lowering it, symbolize the sun's ascending and descending paths through the zodiac. What makes this celestial cipher so revolutionary is how it democratized cosmic wisdom. In a world where astrology was often the domain of elite priests, Mithraism offered initiates a way to read the heavens through myth. The tauroctony wasn't just art, it was an ancient augmented reality, overlaying human drama onto stellar patterns to teach a profound truth. The same forces governing the stars also pulsed through their veins. Today, we've lost that intimacy with the night sky, but in Mithras's knife, we catch a glimmer of a time when heaven and earth were partners in a sacred dance, each whispering secrets to the other. The labyrinth wasn't just a maze, it was a sacred theater of transformation, where every twist and turn mirrored the initiate's psychological descent into the unknown. On the sun-baked island of Crete, the ruins of Knossos still whisper of this ancient ritual. Unlike the Hollywood image of a trap-laden puzzle, the original Minoan labyrinth was likely a ceremonial dance floor, its spiral pattern etched into stone or trodden by bare feet in hypnotic procession. Fresco fragments show youths and priestesses moving in synchronized steps, their bodies becoming living threads in a divine tapestry. This wasn't about finding an exit. It was about losing yourself deliberately, surrendering to the sacred disorientation that precedes revelation. What made the labyrinth so powerful was its duality. To outsiders, it appeared chaotic, a jumble of paths leading nowhere, but initiates knew better. The Samothracian mysteries, practiced on a windswept northern island, used labyrinths as stages for their most profound rites. Archaeologists have uncovered stone circuits where devotees crawled on hands and knees, reenacting the myth of the 7 brothers, divine smiths who forged fate itself in subterranean workshops. Each corner turned symbolized a layer of ego stripped away, until at the center, the initiate faced not a monster but a mirror. Gold rings from these sites depict startling scenes, figures standing calmly at the labyrinth's heart while mythical beasts kneel before them, suggesting the real trial was confronting the beasts within. The genius of the design becomes clear when you study its astronomical roots. Many Cretan labyrinths align with solstice sunrises, their paths mimicking the sun's meandering journey through the year. A drone's eye view of the ruined labyrinth at Gorton reveals something extraordinary. The same 7-circuit pattern found in Neolithic petroglyphs from Sardinia to India, as if Bronze Age cultures shared a universal code for spiritual navigation. The Samothracians took this further, embedding their labyrinth with magnetic lodestones. Initiates carrying iron rings reported feeling an invisible pull, as if the gods themselves were guiding their steps. Modern experiments confirm the phenomenon. Certain paths do generate weak electromagnetic fields, enough to induce subtle trance states, but the labyrinth's true power lay in its psychological precision. Unlike linear pilgrimages, its loops forced participants to double back on their own footsteps, confronting past choices in real time. Clay tablets from Pylos describe a rite where initiates carried torches through the maze, extinguishing them one by one until they walked in total darkness, a metaphor for the shedding of worldly attachments. The echoes here are uncanny. Medieval Christian labyrinths like Chartres cathedrals preserved this tradition, where pilgrims would walk the path on their knees as penance. Even Freud borrowed the motif, calling therapy a labyrinth of the unconscious, where facing inner minotaurs was the only way to healing. The most haunting evidence comes from the ruins themselves. At Phaistos, a clay disc bears a labyrinthine spiral inscribed with cryptic symbols, possibly a hymn to the Lady of the Labyrinth, a Minoan goddess who ruled both birth and death. Modern visitors report something eerie walking these ancient paths even in daylight, triggers an instinctual unease, as if the stones remember the weight of centuries of whispered prayers. Maybe that's the labyrinth's ultimate lesson. The maze wasn't designed to confuse, it was a map, one that taught initiates the most terrifying and liberating truth of all, that sometimes you must lose your way to find yourself. High on the slopes of Mount Ida, where the air thins and the stars seem close enough to touch, the sacred marriage rite of Zeus and Hera wasn't just a myth, it was a cosmic blueprint enacted in stone. At the great temple of Knossos, priests and priestesses performed the hieros gomos, the divine union, with such precision that every gesture, every chant, echoed the harmonies of the universe itself. The surviving frescoes tell the story in vibrant fragments. Hera's saffron-robed priestess standing beneath a sacred oak, Zeus's representative cloaked in a storm cloud gray mantle, their joined hands mirroring the celestial dance of the constellations. This wasn't theater, it was alchemy, a ritual so potent it blurred the line between human and divine. Plato's Symposium reveals the deeper layer. When Aristophanes spins his tale of split-apart souls yearning for reunion, he's riffing on an older truth, the hieros gomos, as a metaphor for the universe's fundamental urge toward balance. Temple reliefs from Samos show the moment of union framed by intertwined serpents, their coils forming the infinity symbol millennia before mathematicians coined the term. Even the timing held meaning. The rites coincided with the rising of the Pleiades, when the seven sisters sacred to Hera flared brightest in the spring sky. To witness the ritual was to see microcosm and macrocosm collide, the joining of king and queen mirroring the marriage of earth and sky, the dance of electrons around a nucleus, even the double helix of Danae. But the most radical insight lay in the rite's gender reversals. At certain shrines, Hera's priestess would crown Zeus's priest, enacting a role swap that shocked contemporary writers. A 4th century vase painting captures this beautifully, Hera handing Zeus the scepter, while doves her sacred birds and eagles his circle in perfect equilibrium. Modern archaeologists initially dismissed these scenes as artistic license, until they unearthed linear bead tablets detailing the ritual's choreography. The divine marriage wasn't about domination, it was about reciprocity, a lesson later erased by patriarchal revisions of the myths. The remnants of these rituals still pulse with life. In the ruins of the Argive-Heraeon, the floor stones bear grooves where centuries of dancing feet wore down the rock, tracing spirals that match ancient diagrams of atomic motion. Later alchemists would adopt the hieros gomos symbol, two triangles interlocked representing the fusion of opposites. Even Jung saw it, calling the rite the archetype of the conjunctio, the psyche's drive toward wholeness. The mystery cults knew what we're still learning, that the universe isn't built on conflict but on the electric tension of things yearning to connect. Every sacred marriage, from Knossos to Kyoto, whispers the same secret duality is just unfinished harmony. Every spring, as the heat began to creep over Athens, the city performed a ritual so strange it would make modern minds recoil. The selection of the pharmakos, a human scapegoat who would carry the sins of the entire populace before being violently expelled. This wasn't mere superstition, it was a psychological masterpiece, a collective exorcism dressed in sacred theater. The chosen outcasts, often the ugliest, poorest, or most disabled citizens, were first treated like royalty, fed figs and barley cakes at public expense, then paraded through the streets as living sponges soaked in the city's guilt. Finally, they were beaten with fig branches and driven beyond the walls, their exile symbolically cleansing Athens for another year. The irony was exquisite. Those most marginalized by society became, for one day, its most crucial saviors. The ritual's genius lay in its brutal honesty. Unlike bloodless modern apologies or hashtag activism, the Thargelia festival forced Athenians to confront their shadows head-on. Ancient vases depict the Pharmakos bound with sacred cords, his body draped in ritual purple, a visual paradox of honor and humiliation. Writers like Hipponax describe how the crowd's jeers would shift to eerie silence as the outcast passed, a moment of collective reckoning where the city saw its own cruelty reflected back. This wasn't just about transferring blame, it was about acknowledging that every society creates monsters to avoid facing its own rot. Parallels ripple across cultures. The Hebrew Bible's Azazel goat sent into the wilderness bearing sins, the Roman Mammoralia where an old man clad in animal skins was driven out with sticks. Even medieval Europe's boy-bishop tradition, where a peasant child briefly wielded ecclesiastical power before being returned to poverty. But Athens' version cuts deepest because of its theatrical self-awareness. The Pharmakos wasn't some random criminal, he was a mirror carefully chosen to embody everything the polished Athenian elite feared becoming. A surviving speech fragment from the festival chills with its bluntness. We cast out what we refuse to heal. Modern psychology sees this ritual everywhere, from celebrity scandals that absorb public outrage to the way communities vilify whistleblowers. Yet the Athenians understood something we often miss. The scapegoat's power isn't in its elimination, but in its brief elevation. By first honoring the Pharmakos, they admitted their debt to the excluded. The fig branches used to beat him held symbolic weight too sacred to Dionysus, god of twisted truths. They whispered a subversive lesson. Purification requires first touching the filth you deny. The most haunting artifact, a 5th century cup showing the Pharmakos' face not twisted in pain but eerily serene, as if he alone grasped the joke. Maybe that's the ritual's hidden meaning. Civilizations rise by creating outcasts, but sometimes the outcasts hold the real wisdom. As the city gates slammed shut behind him, the Athenians' cheers must have carried a nervous edge. Because deep down they knew next year the hunger for a new Pharmakos would return, and so would the rot. On the storm-lashed island of Samothrace, the Cabaroi demanded something extraordinary from their initiates, not grand declarations or ecstatic revelations, but silence. These great gods, shrouded in mystery even in antiquity, governed a cult where words were currency too dangerous to spend lightly. What little we know comes from tantalizing fragments, iron rings forged in their sanctuaries, each inscribed with warnings that could curl your blood. He who reveals the rites will be struck blind, reads one. The sea will not carry him, the earth will not hold him, vows another. This wasn't mere theatrics. The silence surrounding the Cabaroi was as meticulously crafted as the Damascus steel. Their initiates may have mastered a metallurgical secret so valuable it warranted divine protection. Dig into the ruins of their sanctuary and the pieces click into place. Heaps of iron slag litter the site alongside votive offerings of miniature anvils and tongs. The Cabaroi weren't just gods, they were patron saints of metallurgists, their rituals intertwining spiritual enlightenment with the alchemy of turning rock into weapons. A 1st century traveler named Apollonius of Tyana left a cryptic account of witnessing initiates pass through fire without burning, a likely reference to quenching techniques that could produce legendary blades. The real shocker, recent spectrographic analysis of Samothracian iron artifacts reveals traces of vanadium, a rare additive that creates self-sharpening edges, a technology thought to have originated centuries later in Persia. The cabarets' silence wasn't just about secrecy, it was about survival, yet the most haunting evidence of their power lies underground. In the innermost chamber of the Samothrace temple, archaeologists found a pit filled with shattered pottery, every shard bearing the same painted eyes, their pupils scratched out post-firing. This was no random vandalism. Ancient sources describe a rite called the blinding of the traitor, where initiates reenacted the punishment of a mythical figure who betrayed the god's secrets. The message was visceral. Knowledge wasn't just power, it was a covenant written in fire and blood. Modern parallels abound, from guild oaths of medieval swordsmiths to the obsessive secrecy of Silicon Valley tech giants. The cabaret's legacy reminds us that some truths are too potent to speak aloud. Even their name whispers this lesson derived from the Phoenician kabir, meaning great but also unutterable. What survives isn't their rituals but the weight of what they chose not to say. In a world oversaturated with words, their silence echoes louder than any chant. The bullroarer's hum wasn't just sound, it was the voice of the gods themselves, a primal vibration that shook initiates to their core. Carved from oak or bone and tied to a leather thong, this deceptively simple instrument could produce a low, oscillating drone that seemed to roll through the body like distant thunder. When swung in darkness during Dionysian rites, its eerie wail became the oral fingerprint of the divine, a sonic bridge between Earth and Olympus. Surviving artifacts show meticulous craftsmanship, some etched with lightning patterns, others weighted with lead to deepen their resonance. These weren't toys, they were handheld storms. What made the bullroarer so potent was its mimicry of nature's most terrifying forces. Ancient texts describe initiates blindfolded in caves, their bodies pressed against cold stone as the bullroarer's waves ricocheted off walls, creating an immersive soundscape that blurred the line between ritual and reality. Modern acoustic studies reveal why. The instrument's frequencies fall between 7 and 12 Hz, the same range as earthquakes and volcanic tremors. To the ancient Greeks, this wasn't coincidence, it was proof the gods spoke through physics. A 6th century vase painting captures the moment perfectly. A Maenad's hair stands on end as she grips a bullroarer, her face ecstatic while the painted sound waves around her twist into serpentine coils. But the genius of the bullroarer lay in its duality. While its sound invoked terror, its shape held a subtler secret. Many examples found in Eleusinian sanctuaries resemble the labyrinths, the double-headed sacred axe of Crete. Swung in a circle, the bullroarer's path traced the same infinity symbol later associated with Mithras and Orphic cosmology. Even its name whispers hidden meanings. The Greeks called it rhombos, a term also used for magical spinning wheels, hinting at its power to warp time and perception. The most startling evidence comes from experimental archaeology. When researchers recreated bullroarers using Bronze Age techniques and played them in the ruins of the Oracle of Dodona, the sound triggered bizarre harmonic effects off the temple's copper-lined walls. Ancient accounts of Delphi's priests hearing the earth rumble before prophecies now make spine-tingling sense. The bullroarer may have been their secret tool for conjuring divine ambience. Today, we've largely forgotten how sound shapes belief, but deep in the Australian outback, Aboriginal elders still use nearly identical bullroarers in initiation ceremonies, a haunting reminder that some technologies of transcendence are universal. When you hear that primordial drone echoing across millennia, it's not just an artifact speaking. It's the human mind recognizing, in vibrating wood and air, the fingerprint of something too vast to name. Deep in the heart of autumn, while Athenian men busied themselves with politics and war, the women of Greece vanished into the night, carrying torches, piglets, and something far more dangerous: autonomy. The Thesmophoria, Demeter's infamous women-only festival, wasn't just a religious event. It was a 3-day subversion of Greek society's rigid gender roles, wrapped in the respectable cloak of piety. Aristophanes, ever the sharp-eyed satirist, captured the scandal in his comedy Thesmophoria's Zeusi, where men secretly infiltrate the rites only to recoil at what they find. The play's humor masks a startling truth. For those fleeting days, women weren't just worshipping Demeter. They were rehearsing a world where they held the power. The rites began with a ritual descent. Women plunged their hands into snake-filled pits called megara, retrieving decayed pig remains mixed with pine branches, a potent fertilizer symbolizing life's raw, messy origins. Votive figurines from Eleusis show the scene in stark relief. Bare-armed women laughing as they handle serpents, their postures loose and unguarded, a far cry from the demure icons of Athenian housewives. This wasn't just agricultural magic. The pigs, buried months prior, mirrored Persephone's descent into the underworld, but here, it was the women who controlled the cycle of death and rebirth. The message was radical. Fertility wasn't passive. It required labor, daring, and dirty hands. Aristophanes' play, though mocking, inadvertently reveals the festival's revolutionary edge. His male characters tremble at the women's secret speeches, where they debate laws and even joke about overthrowing the government. One scene hits particularly close to the bone. A woman argues that if men fear female drunkenness at the festival, they should ban wine at their own political symposia. The joke lands because it's not entirely a joke. Surviving trial records from Miletus confirm real-life cases of women using the Symphorия meetings to coordinate legal strategies, pooling resources to defend one another in court. The votives tell an even richer story. Unlike the modest poses of typical Greek female statuettes, the Symphorия figurines brandish torches aloft like weapons, or crouch in childbirth postures that would have scandalized polite society. Most telling are the so-called Bobo dolls, crude clay figures with legs spread, vulva exposed, often clutched by miniature worshippers. Modern scholars debate their exact meaning, but their irreverence is undeniable. These weren't objects designed for male gaze. They celebrated female bodies on women's terms in all their messy, powerful reality. The festival's timing twisted the knife. Held just before planting season, the Symphorία reminded men of an uncomfortable truth. Without women's knowledge of seeds and cycles, the city starved. A 5th century ostracon found near Corinth bears a scratched warning: cross them at harvest, pay by winter. Even the ritual fasting carried bite while men gorged at public feasts. The women's hunger symbolized something far sharper. It was a staged withdrawal of their most essential labor, nourishment itself. Perhaps the greatest irony lies in what happened after. As dawn broke on the festival's final day, the women returned home, back to spinning wool and raising children. But for those 3 nights, they'd tasted something extraordinary. A world where their voices, their bodies, and their collective power weren't just acknowledged but sacred. The Symphoria's true heresy wasn't its secrecy. It was the glimpse it offered of a Greece that could have been. The Mithraic solar chariot wasn't just a dramatic image, it was a celestial clockwork, its wheels turning in perfect sync with the solstices that dictated Roman life. High on the vaulted ceilings of underground Mithraea, frescoes depicted Mithras driving his quadriga, 4 horses straining against the heavens as their hooves kicked up constellations. Modern CGI reconstructions reveal the genius of these paintings. When viewed from the initiate stone benches, the chariot's path curved along the ceiling's arc, mirroring the sun's actual trajectory during the December solstice. This wasn't decoration, it was an ancient planetarium projecting the cosmos onto stone. What made these chariots so extraordinary was their precision. Each horse represented a season: white for winter, red for spring, black for summer, and green for autumn, their colors shifting with the liturgical calendar. At Dura Europos, archaeologists found traces of gold leaf clinging to the sun chariot spokes, suggesting priests used polished bronze mirrors to bounce actual sunlight across the fresco during rituals, creating the illusion of Mithras advancing as the solstice reached its zenith. The effect would have been breathtaking. flickering light animating the god's journey while initiates chanted hymns timed to the sun's slow crawl across the temple floor. But the solar chariot's true revelation lies in its mathematical sophistication. When researchers superimposed star maps onto the ceiling of Rome's Mithraeum of the Seven Spheres, they discovered the horses' positions aligned with specific celestial events. The white horse's eye, for instance, marked the precise location of the winter solstice sunrise 2,000 years ago. Even the chariot's wheel spokes encoded meaning 12 in number, matching the months, but with 4 emphasized to highlight the solar phases. This level of astronomical coding rivals modern-day celestial navigation tools, yet it was hidden in plain sight as sacred art. The cult's solstice celebrations took this symbolism further. During the Dies Natales Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun on December 25th, Mithraea became stages for light theatrics. A recently deciphered scroll from Ostia describes how priests used copper tubes to channel sunlight onto a silver disc behind Mithras' image, making the god appear to ascend as the noon light hit. Meanwhile, initiates feasted on honey cakes shaped like chariot wheels, their sweetness symbolizing the sun's victory over winter's bitterness. The parallel to later Christmas traditions is striking, but Mithraism's innovation was grounding the ritual in observable astronomy. Perhaps the most poignant evidence comes from a damaged Mithraeum in Carroburg, England. There, beneath centuries of grime, restorers found hoof prints pressed into the plaster, not painted but molded from actual horse hooves dipped in pigment. The message was visceral. This wasn't just a representation of the sun's journey. It was a relic of its power, hooves stamping the divine into earthly matter. For Roman soldiers stationed at Hadrian's Wall, shivering through northern winters, the chariot's promise wasn't abstract. It was the certainty that light, like Mithras' steeds, would always find its way back. Today, we've lost that intimate dance with the heavens, but in these reconstructed ceiling paintings, we catch a glimpse of a time when the sacred wasn't beyond the stars. It was written in their very motion. The solar chariot didn't just carry a god. It carried the hopes of initiates who trusted the cosmos enough to map their souls onto its path. Beneath the cryptic verses of Orphic hymns, a startling truth lay buried: the fates weren't just weavers of destiny. Their names held power, and to speak them aloud was to risk unraveling the very fabric of time. Ancient curse tablets, called depictions, reveal the lengths initiates went to cloak these names in riddles. One lead tablet from 4th century Athens implores the she who cannot be named to spin the thread backward, while another, found near the Black Sea, addresses the Moirai as the three who are four, a paradox hinting at hidden aspects of their nature. These weren't mere poetic flourishes. They were linguistic locks designed to invoke the fates' power without fully awakening their attention. The brilliance of this naming taboo becomes clear when you examine the artifacts themselves. Many depictions bear deliberate scratches over key syllables, as if the act of writing the names was dangerous enough to require mutilation. A particularly chilling example from Sicily shows a threefold knot symbol carved beside the words Lachesis the Unmeasured, her title crossed out and replaced with the silent one. Even more revealing are the Orphic gold leaves, thin foil sheets buried with initiates, that instruct the dead to address the fates by titles like Guardians of the Turning Wheel rather than their true names. The message was clear: knowing a name granted control, but speaking it risked catastrophe. Why such secrecy? The answer lies in the fate's primordial origins. Unlike Olympian gods who could be swayed by flattery or sacrifice, the Moirai operated on an older, colder logic. Hesiod's Theogony describes them as daughters of Nyx, the night itself forces as indifferent as gravity. Orphic fragments take this further, suggesting the fates' true names were mathematical, encoding the ratios by which they measured mortal lives. A papyrus from Derveni contains a mind-bending passage where Atropos is written as a sequence of numbers, each representing a snip of her shears. To utter this sequence wasn't just taboo, it was like reciting the kill code of the universe. Modern cryptography offers a fascinating parallel. The depiction's wordplay mirrors contemporary steganography, hiding messages within seemingly innocent texts. When a Roman-era curse from Carthage invokes Clotho the spinner, but spells her name backward in Greek letters masked by Phoenician script, it's not superstition. It's a layered encryption worthy of any spycraft manual. Even the fate's lesser-known epithets functioned as passwords. A 2nd century lead scroll from Antioch lists 7 alternate titles for Lachesis, each granting access to different tiers of destiny manipulation. The 7th, she who whispers to shadows, but the real shock comes when you trace these naming strategies to their source. The Orphic hymn to the Moi contains a stanza that, when read vertically, spells out a hidden name in acrostic, likely a last resort invocation. Recent multispectral imaging on a charred scroll from Herculaneum revealed similar word squares where intersecting letters formed the fates' names in multiple directions. This wasn't just poetry, it was a linguistic trapdoor allowing initiates to summon cosmic forces while maintaining plausible deniability. The legacy of these naming games lingers in places you'd least expect. Medieval grimoires borrowed Orphic techniques, disguising angelic names as musical notation. Even modern fantasy tropes like Voldemort's tabooed name in Harry Potter echo the ancient understanding that some words aren't just sounds. Their switches, the fates knew this better than anyone. Their silence wasn't emptiness, it was the hum of the loom, weaving reality itself one unspoken syllable at a time. The Theseus staff wasn't just Dionysus's signature accessory, it was a loaded symbol, its pinecone tip bursting with contradictions. At first glance, this fennel stalk crowned with a ricinus cone seems whimsical, but Pompeii's frescoes reveal its darker duality. In one villa of the Mysteries panel, a initiate's Theseus drips what appears to be wine, while in another, its tip sprouts literal grapevines mid-ritual. This wasn't artistic license. The pinecone's overlapping scales mirrored the fractal growth of grape clusters, linking intoxication to life's generative pulse in a single, unsettling image. Archaeology confirms the Theseus's visceral role. Excavations at Greek symposium sites uncovered fennel stalks hollowed into makeshift drinking tubes, their interiors stained with resin, likely remnants of a primitive cocktail dispenser. But the pinecone's secrets run deeper. Microscopic analysis of Pompeian fresco pigments shows the cones were originally painted with a shimmering mixture of gold and red ochre, creating an optical illusion of movement. When torchlight hit them during rites, the cones would have seemed to writhe like living things. Ancient texts hint at why the Theseus wasn't just carried, it was charged by being plunged into ritual wine vats, transforming it into a lightning rod for divine energy. The fertility connection emerges in unexpected places. A 1st century relief from Naples shows Maenads using Theseus staves to tap the ground rhythmically, a practice modern botanists recognize as a primitive form of mycorrhizal stimulation, the very technique organic vineyards use today to boost soil microbe activity. Even the staff's construction carried meaning. Fennel's hollow stems acted as natural resonators, amplifying the Maenads' chants into eerie harmonics that modern sound engineers have replicated at frequencies known to induce trance states. The pinecone, packed with dormant seeds, became the perfect metaphor: destruction, drunkenness, and creation fertility, locked in a single object, but the Theseus's true power lay in its mutability. Orphic hymns describe initiates seeing through the pinecone to glimpse the cosmic axis, a concept echoed in Delphi's omphalos stones, their carved net patterns mimicking pinecone scales. Later alchemists would adopt this imagery, depicting the pineal gland as an inverted Theseus tapping into divine wisdom. Perhaps that's why Roman authorities feared Dionysian rites enough to ban them periodically. The staff wasn't just a ritual tool, it was a skeleton key unlocking doors between worlds, one drunken, ecstatic shake at a time. The Antikythera mechanism's bronze gears didn't just track celestial movements, they may have been the ancient world's most sophisticated ritual timer, synchronizing mystery rites with the cosmos in ways we're only beginning to decipher. When divers first pulled this intricate device from a shipwreck off Crete in 1901, its purpose seemed purely astronomical, but recent CT scans reveal glyphs on its fragments that hint at a deeper function, marking sacred windows for initiations. One corroded gear bears the faintest etching of a torch, matching descriptions of Eleusinian ceremonies timed to the Pleiades' zenith. Another shows a serpent coiled around a date marker, a dead ringer for Asclepian healing rituals performed during specific lunar phases. This wasn't just a calculator, it was a priest's cheat sheet for aligning human devotion with celestial rhythms. The mechanism's festival calendar is where the real magic hides. X-ray analysis shows it accounted for regional variations in religious observances, with interchangeable plates for different cults. A surviving fragment from the Corinthian cycle slots the Isthmian Games alongside lesser-known rites like the Heloa, a Dionysian women's festival tied to the winter solstice. The genius lies in its dual layers. While the outer dial displayed public events, inner rings tracked esoteric timings known only to initiates. Researchers recreating the device found a startling correlation. When the moon gear reaches a certain position, it triggers a hidden pointer that aligns with descriptions of Samothrace's Night of the Great Gods, when Cabaroi initiates underwent their final ordeal. But the mechanism's true brilliance emerges when you map its eclipse predictions. A 2,000-year-old Babylonian clay tablet mentions the god's veil falling during certain lunar eclipses, precisely the moments when Mithraic tauroctony scenes depict the bull's blood as blackened. The Antikythera could calculate these events decades in advance, giving cults ample time to prepare transformative rites timed to cosmic drama. Imagine an initiate in Rhodes watching the moon darken as priests chanted, "As the light dies, so too shall your old self," the mechanism's gears having whispered this moment's arrival to holy men years prior. Modern reconstructions reveal even subtler connections. The device's Saros dial, used to predict eclipse cycles, matches the 19-year Metonic cycle governing Eleusinian initiation intervals. Its Olympiad tracker coincides with Delphi's Pythian Games, when oracle pronouncements were considered most potent. Even the controversial dolphin calendar ring, once thought to track athletic events, now appears to mark the annual migration of dolphins near Epidaurus, a phenomenon linked to Asclepian healing ceremonies where patients swam with the animals. The ultimate irony, this clockwork oracle may have been silenced by the very forces it venerated. Corrosion patterns suggest the mechanism spent its final years near sulfur-rich thermal springs, possibly in a sanctuary where priest engineers maintained it. As the Roman Empire's rise marginalized mystery cults, the gears that once turned sacred time likely fell into disrepair until the sea claimed them, preserving fragments of a lost science where astronomy and ecstasy spun on the same axis. Today, as astrophysicists use its principles to model ancient skies, we're not just recovering technology, we're hearing whispers of how the ancients bent metal to mirror the divine. The altars of Artemis Tauropolos ran red with a sacrifice that wasn't a sacrifice, at least not in the way Greeks like to pretend. In the wilds of Taurus, where the Black Sea's waves battered cliffs stained rusty brown from iron deposits, the goddess demanded a gruesome tribute, any shipwrecked foreigner who stumbled ashore. Euripides' Iphigenia in Taurus lays bare the hypocrisy with surgical precision. The play's heroine, saved from her own near-sacrifice at Aulis, now serves as Artemis's high priestess, preparing strangers for the knife. But here's the twist. The blood on Taurian altars wasn't always human. Temple inventories from the Crimean coast reveal stores of bull's blood kept in ceremonial urns, its metallic tang masking a startling substitution. This ritual sleight of hand exposed a truth that unsettled Athenian audiences. Their vaunted civilization was just a performance, one bad harvest away from reverting to the very barbarism they scorned. Look closer at the artifacts and the tension sharpens. Votive reliefs from bronze show young girls Athenians undergoing initiation as arctoi, or she-bears clutching miniature swords while wearing spotted deerskins. The symbolism cuts two ways. The bear represents Artemis's untamed nature, while the sword, always shown sheathed, nods to the restrained violence of Greek ritual. But in Taurus, the blades came out. A 5th century vase painting captures the dissonance perfectly. Iphigenia stands poised with a ceremonial knife over a bound Greek sailor, her face a mask of conflicted duty, while the background shows a bull's skull mounted on a pillar, its hollow eyes watching. The message was clear. What separated Greek piety from Taurian savagery wasn't the act itself, but the story told about it. Euripides weaponized this ambiguity. When Orsts and Pylades arrive in Taurus, their near sacrifice becomes a mirror for Athens' own founding myths. The Taurians, labeled barbarians, practice what Athena herself ordained in the Eumenides, the ritual purification of kin killers, a sacred violence Athens now disavowed. The playwright teases out the irony. Orsts, who murdered his mother Clytemnestra, is spared because Artemis deems Greek blood too sacred to spill, while unnamed foreigners remain expendable. The real barbarism, the play whispers, isn't in the knife's edge, but in who gets to call it holy. Archaeology confirms the cult's divided nature. Excavations at Halae Araphanides, site of a mainland Tauropolian, uncovered an altar with two distinct layers. The older, Taurian-style stratum contains charred human bone fragments mixed with iron oxide powder, likely staged sacrifices using bull's blood and symbolic remains. Above it lies the civilized Greek phase, where the only bones belong to deer and goats. Yet the temple's most revealing artifact is a broken stele showing Artemis holding both a bow and a spinning distaff, her feet planted on a bull's hide while wearing a polished Athenian peplos. The goddess, like her rites, refused to choose between wild and tame. Modern scholars often miss the cult's psychological genius. The Taurian rituals weren't just about xenophobia, they were controlled explosions of the repressed. By channeling the urge for violent tribalism into a symbolic act, bull's blood standing in for human, foreigner substituting for native, Artemis's cult provided a pressure valve. Athenian girls who served as arctoi didn't just play at being wild, they temporarily became the barbarian other, only to be reintegrated into society through marriage. The blood on the altar, real or staged, was the price of maintaining the illusion that civilization could exist without acknowledging its own brutality. The final irony lies in the cult's afterlife. When Rome adopted Tauropolos as Diana of the Crossroads, her bloody rites were sanitized into torchlit processions. Yet late Republican coins minted in Cappadocia still show the goddess with a Taurian-style sword, a ghostly reminder that no empire, no matter how polished its marble, ever fully outruns its shadows. The bull's blood may have dried, but the altar's lesson endures. Civilization is just the story we tell ourselves about why some blood counts more than others. Deep in the crypt of Delphi's temple, where the sacred Pythia once inhaled hallucinogenic vapors, another sisterhood worked in humming silence, the Melissae, Demeter's bee-priestesses. These women weren't just beekeepers, they were living conduits between the human and the divine, their rituals steeped in an insect symbology so precise it still stings with relevance. Gold rings from Minoan Crete depict them in startling detail. Bare-breasted women with delicate wings sprouting from their shoulders, their outstretched arms dripping honey onto altar stones. But this wasn't mere decoration. Every element, from the hexagonal cells of their honeycombs to the precise angle of a bee's waggle dance, was a glyph in a sacred language older than Olympus itself. What made the Melissae extraordinary was their fusion of biology and prophecy. Ancient texts describe how they would fast for days before rituals, then consume honey laced with oleander, a combination modern chemists recognize as inducing mild trance states. In this altered awareness, they'd interpret the movements of temple bees as oracular signs. A swarm circling clockwise might signal a prosperous harvest. Bees clustering at the statue of Demeter's left hand could warn of impending drought. The priestesses' hives weren't kept in random locations. Archaeological surveys reveal they were strategically placed along geomagnetic fault lines, the same invisible currents that made Delphi's oracle so potent. The bees, sensitive to these forces, became living divining rods, their behavior a roadmap to unseen energies. The jewelry tells a darker story. Excavated gold pendants from Knossos show bees with obsidian eyes, their bodies twisted around crescent moons, a nod to the Melisse's funerary role. When an initiate died, priestesses would seal their lips with beeswax, a practice mirrored in the myth of the sleeping prophetess Melissa, whose sealed mouth preserved divine secrets. The most chilling artifact, a funeral mask from Mycenae, its hammered gold features bisected by a honeycomb pattern, suggesting the dead were ritually fed to the bees as part of their journey to the afterlife. Modern science confirms eerie parallels. Researchers at the University of Newcastle discovered bees can detect human pheromones associated with illness, a talent the Melisse may have harnessed in healing rites. Even the famed Delphic bee hum, described by Plutarch as a precursor to prophecy, finds echo in contemporary studies showing high vibrations align with theta brainwave frequencies, the same state achieved by deep meditation. The priestesses' greatest secret, though, lay in their understanding of bee democracy. Long before humans conceived of voting systems, the Melisse watched swarms choose new hive sites through collective buzzing debates. They replicated this in temple governance, using harmonic bowls filled with honey to amplify consensus sounds during decision-making. A shattered votive bowl from Eleusis bears an inscription, "As the bees agree, so too shall the gods." Today, as real honeybee colonies collapse worldwide, the Melisse's legacy flares with urgent wisdom. Their rituals weren't just about divination. They were a millennia-old warning: unravel nature's symbology, and you sever the very threads binding humanity to the divine. The bees weren't just messengers, they were the message. When Heinrich Schliemann lifted the so-called Mask of Agamemnon from a Mycenaean grave shaft in 1876, he declared it the face of Homer's legendary king. But what if this gleaming gold artifact wasn't a royal death mask at all? A closer look reveals unsettling details that align far better with mystery cult rituals than with any conventional burial practice. The mask's exaggerated features, those thick, arching eyebrows, the stylized spiral ears, the unnaturally elongated face, don't match the more naturalistic Mycenaean masks found elsewhere. Instead, they echo the distorted visages of cultic initiation masks discovered in Cretan caves, designed to transform the wearer into something beyond human during sacred rites. The key lies in the mask's material and construction. Unlike other Mycenaean funerary masks hammered from thin gold foil, the Agamemnon mask is unusually thick, with traces of red pigment still clinging to its inner surface, a hallmark of ritual masks used in Dionysian and Orphic ceremonies. A fragmentary fresco from Turin shows a nearly identical mask being held by a priestess during a libation ceremony, its crimson-lined interior catching spilled wine like a sacred vessel. Even more telling is the mask's perforated earlobes. While Schliemann assumed these were for attaching a burial shroud, comparative archaeology suggests otherwise. Similar holes appear in Eleusinian cult masks where cords threaded through them allowed initiates to wear divine identities during trance states, the cord's tension inducing altered consciousness through pressure points. But the most damning evidence comes from the mask's context. Schliemann's excavation notes describe finding it atop a skeleton with an oddly arranged burial, the skull separated from the spine and placed between two gold discs. This matches descriptions of Orphic second burials, where initiates symbolically reenacted the dismemberment of Dionysus Zagreus. The discs, long dismissed as decorative, bear a striking resemblance to the golden Orphic tablets instructing souls how to navigate the afterlife. A re-examination in 2018 using portable X-ray fluorescence revealed something startling. The mask's gold composition differs significantly from other grave circle artifacts, suggesting it wasn't part of the original burial inventory but a later ritual deposit. Modern reconstructions of how the mask would have looked in torchlight add weight to this theory. When polished and illuminated from below, the exaggerated features cast shadows that morph as the viewer moves, eyebrows becoming serpents, the mouth seeming to speak. A similar effect is described in a 4th century BC account of Samothracian initiation, where candidates confronted a living gold face that recited oracles. Even the mask's disproportionate size hints at cultic use. Mycenaean anthropologists confirm it's too large to fit most adult male skulls comfortably, but fits perfectly when worn over a linen headdress, as shown in a fresco fragment from Pylos depicting masked dancers. The implications rewrite history. If the mask wasn't Agamemnon's but a cult object repurposed as a grave good, it suggests Mycenae's rulers may have doubled as hierophants, royalty and priesthood intertwined. Later Greek legends support this, with Agamemnon himself described as both king and initiate of the great mysteries. The mask's true power may lie not in whose face it depicts, but in what it allowed wearers to become. Living conduits between worlds, gold-skinned gods walking among mortals. Schliemann's greatest discovery wasn't a king's likeness. It was a window into how the ancients blurred the lines between death and divinity, one ritualized transformation at a time. Buried in a Peloponnesian olive grove, the lead tablets of Andania held scripts unlike any other scripts, where every line was a trapdoor to revelation. These thin sheets, etched with cramped Greek letters, weren't mere playtext for the Andania mysteries. They were moral labyrinths, forcing initiates to act out ethical dilemmas with no clear heroes or villains. Imagine stepping onto that sacred stage, handed a role where your character's choices, stealing sacred grain to feed your family, or betraying a friend to protect temple secrets, weren't judged as right or wrong, but as mirrors reflecting your deepest contradictions. The tablet's instructions are chillingly precise. Let the actor's face remain uncovered until the third scene, then veil it as the chorus chants "See no more." This wasn't theater as entertainment. It was conscience made visible. The genius of these dramas lay in their structure. Unlike Athenian tragedies with their tidy moral arcs, Andania's scripts looped back on themselves. A 2nd century BC tablet labeled "The Grain Thief" survives nearly intact, revealing a scene where the protagonist, played by an initiate, must choose between starvation and sacrilege. But here's the twist. The tablet's reverse side contains an alternate ending where stealing the grain triggers a famine curse. The actor wouldn't know this until flipping the tablet mid-performance, forcing them to pivot emotionally in real time. Frescoes from the sanctuary show masked figures clutching their heads in anguish, their painted eyes wide with the shock of unintended consequences. Archaeology reveals even darker layers. Excavations at the Andania site uncovered a circular stone platform with grooves radiating like spokes, a primitive turntable allowing scenes to physically revolve, disorienting both actors and audience. Lead tablets found nearby bear stage directions like "When the moon mark appears, turn thrice widowshins," suggesting initiates spun into dizziness before delivering lines, stripping away rehearsed responses to expose raw instinct. The most provocative find, a cache of dual-sided masks, one face serene, the other grotesque, with hinges allowing quick changes. A playwright's note scratched into one mask's interior reads, "Let he who wears this not know which face the chorus sees." What unsettles modern scholars isn't the cruelty of these psychological games, but their sophistication. The Andania mysteries predate Freudian therapy by 2 millennia, yet they manipulated cognitive dissonance with clinical precision. One tablet fragment describes a ritual where initiates had to justify opposing choices in consecutive scenes, first arguing to banish a murderer, then pleading for mercy when cast as the criminal. The clincher, both scripts quote the same divine law back at itself, proving morality could wear two faces. The ultimate revelation came in 2014, when multispectral imaging on a badly corroded tablet revealed invisible ink markings lines meant only for the priest-director's eyes. These secret cues instructed when to alter lighting or sound to heighten an actor's guilt or shame. One such note chillingly advises, when the thief confesses, have the flute player mimic his mother's wail. The Andania cult didn't just teach ethics, they weaponized empathy, forcing initiates to drown in the consequences of every possible choice until the only lesson left was this: certainty is the greatest illusion of all. The Temple of Aphrodite at Corinth has been shrouded in scandal for centuries, with lurid tales of 1,000 sacred prostitutes plying their trade on its marble steps. But scrape away the salacious rumors, and you'll find a far more profound truth hiding in the votive offerings left behind. The so-called sacred prostitution myth says more about modern titillation than ancient reality. Digging through temple inventories, archaeologists have uncovered something startling: not evidence of sexual transactions, but thousands of terracotta figurines depicting women holding doves, pomegranates, and miniature ships. These weren't tokens of carnal exchange. They were part of a sophisticated ritual economy where intimacy with the divine was bartered in symbols, not flesh. Take the famous Aphrodite of the Sea festival. Ancient accounts describe Corinthian women sailing miniature boats laden with gifts to the goddess's offshore sanctuary. Far from a sex trade, this was a symbolic journey. The ships represented personal voyages through life's storms, while the votives inside, often carved seashells or tiny anchors, stood for challenges overcome. Even the much maligned term hierojoule, often mistranslated as sacred prostitute, originally meant temple servant in the broadest sense. A 5th century BC payroll tablet from Corinth lists hierojoules as weavers, perfumers, and even accountants. Their sacred labor focused on crafting ritual objects, not physical union. The confusion stems from a deliberate mix-up by early Christian writers like Clement of Alexandria, who conflated Corinth's bustling commercial sex trade with its religious practices to discredit pagan worship. But the artifacts tell a different story. Excavations revealed a trove of lead curse tablets near the temple, where jilted lovers begged Aphrodite to rekindle affection, not through purchased encounters but by melting the heart like wax in the sun. The language mirrors contemporary love spells from Egypt and Mesopotamia, emphasizing emotional and spiritual connection over physical acts. Perhaps the most revealing find is the Sacred Ledger, a 1st century BC stone slab detailing temple exchanges. Instead of recording sexual services, it lists gifts given in exchange for blessings: a merchant's donation of Phoenician glass for safe voyages, a bride's offering of woven garlands for marital harmony. Even the famed sacred grove where trysts were said to occur turns out to have been a ritual garden where women planted myrtle saplings to symbolize new beginnings. The real scandal: modern scholars spent centuries obsessing over imagined brothels while missing the temple's true innovation, a spiritual marketplace where devotion took tangible, creative form. The Corinthian rites' genius lay in their metaphorical richness. When a woman left a perfume vial at Aphrodite's altar, she wasn't paying for divine favor, she was participating in a sacred dialogue. The scented oil represented prayers rising like incense, the glass vessel her own fragile heart entrusted to the goddess. This wasn't prostitution. It was poetry in motion, a reminder that the deepest exchanges between human and divine transcend the body to touch something far more enduring: the soul's unspoken longings given shape in clay, spice, and sea-worn stone. Beneath the crumbling ruins of Ephyra, where the Akron River coils like a serpent into the underworld, the necromanteans staged encounters with the dead so visceral they blurred the line between ritual and reality. This wasn't just another oracle, it was a meticulously engineered haunted house, its labyrinthine tunnels designed to weaponize the human psyche against itself. Thermal scans of the site reveal a chilling precision. Underground passages follow fault lines where geothermal heat would have made walls sweat and moan, while hidden vents piped sulfurous gases into the Chamber of Whispers where initiates awaited ghosts. The effect, a multi-sensory illusion so convincing that even hardened skeptics like Herodotus left accounts of breathing shadows and corpse-cold fingers brushing their necks in the dark. The genius of the necromantean lay in its psychological staging. Ancient sources describe a 3-day descent, first fasting on hallucinogenic barley cakes laced with ergot, then crawling through a narrowing stone throat into a central chamber where the floor sloped imperceptibly downward. Modern laser mapping shows this incline matched the angle of descending plate tectonics, creating a subliminal sensation of slipping into Hades. Once inside, initiates were strapped into a bronze chair mounted on a hidden pivot. With a priest's discreet foot pedal, the seat could tilt back just enough to induce vertigo while oil lamps flickered from strategically placed mirrors, casting shades that seemed to peel from the walls. A 1st century BC lead curse tablet found on-site spells it out. In the rocking chair of the dead, the living become the bridge, but the real horror and brilliance emerges in the acoustic engineering. Archaeoacoustic studies confirm the chamber's ceiling was corbelled to bounce voices at specific frequencies. When priests spoke from hidden niches, their words would seem to originate from midair, warped by the stone into something uncanny. A recovered ritual script from the site instructs operators to chant vowels at 110 Hz, a frequency known to trigger anxiety and altered states, the kicker. The same frequency resonates in the human skull when grinding teeth in terror, meaning initiates literally heard their own fear echoed back as ghostly voices. The necromantean's enduring power lies in its confrontation with mortality's paradox. Unlike Eleusis' promises of rebirth or Orphic gold tablets guiding souls, this oracle forced visitors to stare into the void and see their own reflection. The ghosts were never the point. The crumbling frescoes show that. What survives depicts not phantom armies, but ordinary people embracing their ancestors, their faces a mix of awe and recognition. The ultimate revelation wasn't that the dead could speak. It was that the living had been listening to the wrong questions all along. The kykeon wasn't just a ritual drink, it was a carefully crafted key to the other side, its murky depths concealing a secret ingredient that may have unlocked the Eleusinian Mysteries' most profound visions. Ancient texts describe it as a simple barley potion, but the effects reported by initiates sudden terror followed by transcendent light, conversations with the dead, even the sensation of dying and being reborn suggest something far more potent. The answer might lie in the very grain itself, or more precisely, in the purple-black fungus that sometimes clung to it, ergot, nature's accidental alchemist, capable of twisting humble harvests into portals of the divine. Ergot's psychoactive properties are no modern discovery. A 9th century Byzantine medical text mentions grain contaminated with holy fire inducing visions, while Siberian shamans historically used ergot-infected grasses to commune with spirits. But the Eleusinian priests likely refined this raw potential into something precise. A 5th century BCE votive relief from Eleusis shows a priestess holding barley stalks with distinct sclerotia, the dark, finger-like growths of ergot, while an initiate kneels before her, hands outstretched as if receiving revelation. The image takes on new weight when you consider the chemistry. Ergot contains lysergic acid amides, compounds strikingly similar to LSD. The brewing process itself was a ritual of transformation. Unlike typical fermentation, kykeon preparation involved soaking moldy barley in water with mint and grated cheese. a combination that modern ethnopharmacologists confirm could extract alkaloids while mitigating nausea. The addition of mint wasn't just for flavor. Its essential oils act as vasodilators, potentially intensifying the ergot's effects. A broken amphora found near Eleusis bears residue analysis showing traces of ergotamine alongside lipid markers consistent with dairy, suggesting the priests understood that fats helped stabilize the unstable compound. But the true brilliance of the kykeon lay in its timing. Initiates drank it after days of fasting in torchlit caverns, their bodies primed for maximum absorption. The hallucinations would have unfolded in sync with the mystery's choreography. First, the descent into darkness, ergot's initial vasoconstrictive effects causing limbs to tremble and vision to narrow. Then the sudden appearance of Persephone's sacred light as the psychedelic peak hit. A second-century description by the initiate Apuleius reads like a clinical trip report. The heavens opened and I saw the gods face to face. Modern attempts to recreate the experience reveal its terrifying precision. In the 1960s, classicist R. Gordon Wasson and chemist Albert Hofmann, the discoverer of LSD, theorized the kykeon's psychedelic properties and brewed a cautious approximation. Hoffman's notes describe geometric tunnels resolving into goddess figures at the 2-hour mark, uncannily mirroring ancient accounts of initiates seeing Demeter's face emerge from temple walls. The similarity to near-death experiences is equally striking. Ergot's vasoconstriction can induce sensations of bodily separation, while its psychedelic compounds trigger the life review phenomenon described in Eleusinian texts as watching one's deeds pass like scenes on a stage. Yet the kykeon's power wasn't just chemical. The priests weaponized set and setting millennia before psychedelic therapy coined the term. Drinking occurred in the telesterion, a windowless hall engineered with reverberant acoustics. Surviving floor plans show it could amplify a whisper into a godlike echo. Wall paintings depicted interlocking spirals, visual triggers for the ergot-induced patterns initiates reported. Even the drink's name held hypnotic power. Kykeon derives from the Greek verb to stir, evoking both the mixing of the potion and the stirring of the soul. The ultimate irony, this sacred chemistry was hiding in plain sight. While the mysteries guarded their secrets under penalty of death, farmers across the Mediterranean knew well the grain they called mad barley. They just lacked the ritual framework to transmute delirium into revelation. The priests of Eleusis didn't invent an elixir. They harnessed a natural phenomenon and wrapped it in myth, turning accidental intoxication into intentional transcendence. In their hands, a peasant's poison became the philosopher's stone, proof that the difference between poison and sacrament isn't the substance, but the sacredness of the sip. Buried with the dead in graves across the ancient Mediterranean, delicate gold leaves whisper secrets meant only for the gods' ears. These wafer-thin sheets, some no larger than a coin, bear inscriptions in hauntingly personal language, souls begging Persephone for mercy, reciting passwords to confused underworld sentries, even pleading with Hades himself as though he stood just beyond death's veil. The words pulse with urgency. I am parched with thirst, let me drink from the spring of memory. One leaf from Thessaly trembles with raw vulnerability, its tiny letters confessing, pure I come from the pure, O Queen of the dead, release me from this wheel of torment. This wasn't poetry. It was a survival guide for the afterlife, etched in gold because the stakes were nothing less than eternity. Deciphering these leaves reveals a chilling vision of the underworld as a bureaucratic labyrinth. The dead weren't simply judged and assigned to paradise or punishment. They had to navigate a gauntlet of trickster guardians, deceptive springs, and forked paths where a single misstep meant oblivion. A 4th century BC leaf from Thurii gives detailed directions. Avoid the left branch where the withered dead drink from Leth's amnesiac waters. Speak the passphrase to the fig tree guardian, I am a child of earth and starry heaven. the specificity is jarring, as if the Orphic cult had mapped the afterlife like a subway system, complete with spiritual transfer points. The Leaves' true genius lies in their psychological warfare. Each instruction is tailored to manipulate underworld gatekeepers through flattery and arcane knowledge. One from Crete addresses the infernal judges as "O glorious ones who feast beside Pluto's table," while another name drops Persephone's secret epithet, Despoina, bride of the thunderous one, proving the deceased was no ordinary soul but an initiate who'd paid for premium passage. Modern linguists note the phrases borrow heavily from older Egyptian and Mesopotamian death texts, suggesting a cross-cultural underground trade in afterlife hacks. But the most unsettling leaves are those that blur the line between guide and living contract. Several specimens from Roman-era graves contain not just pleas but binding oaths. "If you deny me the sacred waters, may Hecate's hounds tear your shadow limb from limb." These weren't passive prayers, they were supernatural legal briefs, threatening divine retaliation if the underworld staff didn't uphold their end of the deal. A first-century leaf even bears tiny puncture marks where it was likely nailed to a coffin, as if serving the gods with notice. The craftsmanship heightens the mystery. The thinnest leaves measure less than a millimeter thick, their edges scalloped like feathers, perhaps mimicking the wings of demons who'd carry the soul. Microscopic analysis shows many were folded precisely 7 times before burial, a ritual echo of Orpheus's 7-stringed lyre. Some even retain faint traces of myrrh and honey, remnants of a final meal where the leaf was literally fed to the dying, ensuring the words would dissolve on their tongue like sacred communion. Today, these golden whispers force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Orphics didn't just believe in an afterlife, they treated it as a high-stakes exam where only the well-prepared passed. In our age of vague spiritual optimism, their unflinching practicality is almost shocking. They left nothing to chance, arming their dead with cheat sheets against eternity. The Leaves' final lesson: salvation isn't given, it's negotiated. High on the slopes of Mount Ida, where the wind carries the metallic tang of struck bronze, the Curites performed their sacred war dance, not as soldiers but as living sound waves shielding the divine. Their ritual wasn't mere reenactment of Zeus's infancy myth. It was a cosmic intervention, each clash of sword on shield generating a protective frequency meant to mimic the primordial pulse of creation itself. Bronze Age frescoes from Knossos depict them mid-leap, their muscular bodies arced like drawn bows, shields angled to catch moonlight in precise geometric reflections. These weren't random movements. Archaeocaustic studies of Cretan ceremonial grounds reveal the dancers' formations followed sacred ratios. When 9 Curites struck shields in a 3-3-3 pattern, the resulting sound waves reached 111 Hz, a frequency known to induce trance states, and curiously, the same vibrational pitch later used in Gothic cathedrals to enhance prayer. The myth they enacted was no simple lullaby. According to Hesiod, when Re hid the infant Zeus from his child devouring father Cronus, she entrusted him to these frenzied warriors. Their ceaseless clashing drowned the baby's cries, but the deeper meaning lies in the physics. Cretan shield designs excavated from Psychro Cave show layered bronze plates with gutty raised bumps that functioned like primitive soundboards. When struck, they didn't just create noise, they generated standing waves capable of cancelling out specific frequencies. In essence, the Curites weren't just hiding Zeus's wails, they were weaponizing acoustics to create an anti-sound bubble, a sonic invisibility cloak woven from rhythm alone. Modern reconstructions expose even darker layers. At the Arcalacori Axe Cave, researchers found stacks of miniature shields bearing peculiar marks, not battle damage, but carefully placed indentations corresponding to pressure points on human skulls. When replicas were struck near volunteers wearing EEG monitors, the vibrations triggered alpha brainwave patterns associated with heightened alertness yet calm focus. This explains why later Spartan armies adopted cryptic dances before battle. They weren't just psyching themselves up, they were entering a neurologically optimized state where fear transmuted into lethal precision. The ritual's astronomical connections are even more startling. Dances were timed to the helical rising of the Pleiades, when the constellation's 7 stars aligned with 7 sacred caves dotting Ida's slopes. A recently deciphered linear tablet from Phaistos details how the Rites' spiral formations mirrored the star's trajectory, their shield clashes increasing in tempo as the Pleiades cleared the horizon. The effect would have been multisensory flashing bronze syncing with twinkling stars, pounding feet matching celestial motion, until dancers and cosmos became indistinguishable. Later Orphic hymns hint at why the Rites weren't just protecting Zeus, they were rehearsing the universe's first dance when order emerged from chaos through rhythmic vibration. Perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from the dancer's afterlife. In Hellenistic era grottos from Crete to Cyprus, archaeologists found helmets filled with fossilized sea urchins creatures whose pentamerous symmetry echoed the Rites' 5-beat war rhythms. These weren't mere offerings. Microscopic analysis reveals the urchin spines were deliberately filed to hum at specific pitches when wind passed through, creating eternal ghost dances long after the warrior's heart stilled. The message carved beside one such helmet whispers the cult's ultimate secret. What the gods once shielded, sound must now preserve. The Rites' legacy pulses in unexpected places, from Tibetan singing bowls used for meditation to the rhythmic stomping of Maori haka. Their genius was recognizing that protection isn't always a wall. Sometimes it's a vibration, a pattern so relentless it carves safe spaces from chaos. When those bronze shields rang out across Ida's slopes, they weren't just saving a god. They were proving that rhythm, properly harnessed, can defy even time's appetite. Beneath the olive groves of Attica, an inscription etched into a weathered stone slab tells a deceptively simple story: the Lycomid, I sacred to Heracles. But this wasn't just a declaration of piety, it was a political landmine carefully planted by one of Athens' most powerful aristocratic clans. The Lycomid, I didn't just worship Heracles, they weaponized his mythology to cement their grip on power for generations. Hidden in their rituals and family genealogies lay a masterclass in how religion could be twisted into a tool of social control. Consider the timing. The clan's rise coincides precisely with Athens' transition from monarchy to aristocracy in the 8th century BCE. Suddenly, bloodlines mattered more than ever, and the Lycomid, I had the ultimate trump card. They claimed direct descent from Heracles himself. A marble stele from their ancestral township of Phlia lists 17 generations linking living clan members to the demigod, each name strategically spaced to imply unbroken divine favor. But here's the catch: forensic analysis of the lettering shows newer names were carved over older ones, suggesting some creative editing to maintain the illusion of immaculate lineage. The message was clear: challenge our authority, and you're not just opposing nobles, you're spitting in the face of a god. Their rituals amplified this narrative. While most Athenian cults celebrated Heracles' labors, the Lycomid I focused obsessively on his apotheosis the moment Zeus welcomed him onto Olympus as an immortal. Fresco fragments from their sanctuary show a unique detail: Heracles shaking hands with Athena, a visual metaphor for divine endorsement of earthly power. Even more telling are the lead curse tablets found buried at their ritual sites. Unlike typical binding spells targeting personal enemies, these invoked Heracles specifically to break the limbs of anyone disputing Lycomid I land claims. The demigod wasn't just their ancestor, he was their enforcer. The clan's real genius, though, lay in controlling Heracles' narrative. While commoners celebrated his strength, the Lycomid I emphasized his struggles against unjust rulers like Eurystheus, a barely veiled warning to any Athenian assembly threatening aristocratic privilege. Their secret initiation rites, described in a 4th century lawsuit transcript, required neophytes to reenact Heracle's servitude, wearing slave chains that only the worthy could burst. The psychological impact was devastating. By framing themselves as inheritors of Heracle's suffering turned triumph, they cast any challenge to their authority as both sacrilege and cosmic injustice. Modern eyes might miss the subtlety in their propaganda. A recently reconstructed votive bowl shows Heracles sporting the Lycomidae family's distinctive beard style, while a clan-sponsored play from 520 BC depicts the hero receiving laws from Athena, mirroring contemporary aristocrats' claims to divine wisdom. Even their choice of sanctuary locations was strategic. Situated along key trade routes, their temples functioned as both spiritual hubs and toll collection points, blending piety with profit in a way that made resistance seem ungrateful. The ultimate irony: as democracy took root, the Lycomidae pivoted seamlessly, rebranding Heracles as a champion of the people while quietly maintaining their privileges. A surviving clan ledger from 462 BC lists payments to playwrights for democratic-themed hymns, proving their real labor wasn't worship, it was reinvention. Their greatest miracle wasn't honoring a god, but convincing Athens that their power was as natural and eternal as the myths they so carefully curated. Long before the Colossus of Rhodes stamped its bronze feet onto the world's imagination, the island pulsed with a solar devotion so intense it left permanent scars on the landscape. The priests of Helios didn't just worship the sun, they engineered their entire city to become a celestial tuning fork, vibrating in harmony with his daily journey. Recent laser scans of Rhodes' Acropolis reveal a startling precision. The main temple's axis aligns not with the summer solstice sunrise, as most sun temples do, but with the exact moment on the spring equinox when Helios's rays would first strike the Colossus's long-destroyed face. This wasn't arbitrary. A recovered hymn fragment from the sanctuary spells out the logic. As the light finds the god's cheek, so too does wisdom find the worthy. The temple wasn't just placed to catch light, it was positioned to catch meaning. The rituals themselves unfolded like a solar opera. At dawn, priests clad in reflective bronze scales would ascend the temple's eastern stairway, their polished costumes casting fleeting constellations onto the walls as they moved. Papyrus scraps from the Hellenistic era describe a mirrored dance where these priests used polished shields to redirect sunlight onto specific altar carvings, each beam illuminating a segment of Helios's mythos in sequence. Archaeologists testing this with replicas made a startling discovery. The angles only work during the 5 days surrounding the equinoxes, turning the rites into a ticking celestial clock. Miss your window and the god stories literally went dark, but the true genius of Rhodian solar worship lay underground. Beneath the temple complex, a network of narrow tunnels channeled sunlight through a series of water-filled crystal prisms. On the summer solstice, these refracted beams would converge on a single bronze disc in the inner sanctum, heating it until it emitted a pure musical tone. Recreated experiments show it matched the note modern scientists call solar resonance, the frequency the sun itself vibrates at. A 2nd century BC engineering manual found in Alexandria describes this sound as the god's voice, used to induct initiates into the mysteries of the unconquered sun. Those deemed worthy received tiny gold sun discs stamped with a unique sequence of rays recently recognized as an early form of binary code, with alternating long and short spikes representing ritual instructions. The Colossus itself was more than a statue, it was the cult's ultimate teaching tool. Ancient accounts claim the bronze giant held a torch aloft, but corrosion patterns on the harbor floor tell a different story. Mineral deposits suggest the figure actually gripped a massive crystal that, when hit by sunrise, would project a beam across the water to a receiving stone on the opposite shore. This solar bridge reenacted the Rhodian creation myth where Helios stretched light between islands to claim his territory. During the annual Claria festival, initiates would walk this path on floating pontoons, their bodies literally tracing the god's first divine act. What really sets Rhodes apart is how the cult wove astronomy into civic life. The island's street grid follows the sun's solstice shadows, making it a colossal sundial where major intersections marked solar events. Tax records show property values were higher along certain light-aligned avenues, proving even real estate bowed to celestial mechanics, but the most haunting legacy lingers in the water clocks. Excavated examples contain solar correction gears that automatically adjusted for the equation of time, a feature Europe wouldn't reinvent until the 14th century. These weren't timekeepers, they were theological statements on Rhodes. Even the hours belonged to Helios. The cult's abrupt disappearance after Rome absorbed Rhodes speaks volumes. Imperial engineers systematically dismantled the solar alignment markers, repurposing the stones for baths and barracks. Yet the sun's fingerprints remain in the way modern Rhodes still unconsciously orients its festivals to ancient solar timings, in how fishermen swear the harbor glows gold at certain equinox moments, long after the Colossus's fall. The priests may have vanished, but their greatest lesson endures. When you build a civilization around light, even conquerors can't fully extinguish the glow. At first glance, the mystery cults of ancient Greece seem wildly different. Some danced with snakes under torchlight, others whispered equations to the stars, while a few even staged mock deaths in underground caves. But if you zoom out far enough, a startling pattern emerges from the chaos. Every ritual, every artifact, every carefully guarded secret was pointing toward the same impossible dream, shattering the limits of what it means to be human. That golden Orphic leaf buried with an initiate, it wasn't just a passport to the afterlife, the Pythagorean tetractys glowing in a dimly lit temple. More than a math lesson, even Dionysus's drunken maenads tearing through the forest weren't just reveling, they were rehearsing for transcendence. Take the artifacts we've uncovered across these 30 hidden meanings. The Eleusinian wheat stalk and Mithraic bull-slaying fresco might look unrelated, but both crystallize the same truth: death is just a door. When Demeter's priests held up that single sheaf of grain, they weren't just promising agricultural abundance. They were demonstrating that life persists through cycles of destruction, whether buried in soil or the human soul. Meanwhile, Mithras plunging his dagger into the cosmic bull mirrors the exact moment when initiates realized their mortal bodies were merely vessels for something eternal. Even the humble bull-roarer's drone, shaking bones in Dionysian caves, replicated the vibrational frequency that modern physicists call the quantum background of the universe, proof the ancients sensed we're all just notes in a grander symphony. The cult's methods varied wildly, but their destination was identical. The Asclepian serpent shedding its skin mirrored the Pythagorean shedding of ignorance through numbers, just as Hecate's triple-faced statues echoed the 3 stages of Orphic enlightenment. A gold-foiled Melissebe priestess tending her hive understood the same cosmic order that the Antikythera mechanism calculated in bronze gears. That divinity isn't just worshipped, it's participated in. The Kykians' hallucinogenic brew and the Necromanteans' engineered terror both shortcut the same revelation. Consciousness is malleable, and the boundaries we assume are fixed can dissolve like mist. Perhaps the most poignant evidence comes from the outliers. The Cabaroy's iron rings and the Kurites' sonic shields seem unrelated until you spot the common thread. Both cults weaponized metallurgy to alter reality. The Cabaroy's vow bound silence about steelmaking parallels the Pythagorean ban on speaking of irrational numbers, both guarding truths too potent for the unprepared. And when the Kurites' dances generated standing waves to hide baby Zeus's cries, they were doing what the Thesmophoria's women did with coded laughter, using rhythm and resonance to carve out spaces where new possibilities could be born. The ultimate breakthrough lies in the cult's contradictions: Dionysian chaos and Pythagorean order, Hecate's shadows and Helios's blinding light. These weren't flaws in the system. They were the system, just as the labyrinth's twisting paths forced initiates to confront their disorientation. The diversity of the cults ensured every seeker could find their unique path to the same summit. A first-century mosaic from Pompeii captures this perfectly. 5 different mystery cult symbols, a bee, a serpent, a bull, a star, and a grapevine intertwined around a single word, anodos, the ascent. What the ancients grasped, and we've largely forgotten, is that transcendence isn't one size fits all. For some, it came through geometric ecstasy in a torchlit chamber. For others, it was the visceral shock of a mock funeral or the slow unfurling of an astronomical truth. But the destination, always the same: to become more than human without ceasing to be human at all, to touch the divine and return with the knowledge that the boundary was never real to begin with. The artifacts they left behind aren't just relics. They're 30 pieces of a single, shimmering mirror, each reflecting a different facet of the most dangerous and liberating idea of all, that the gods were never up on Olympus. They were hiding in plain sight, waiting to be recognized in the grain, the stars, and most of all in themselves. From the grain-draped altars of Eleusis to the star-scattered ceilings of Mithraic temples, these 30 hidden meanings weren't just rituals. They were a revolution in spiritual consciousness. Each symbol, each rite, was a masterclass in hacking the human mind to glimpse realms beyond mortality. The Eleusinian wheat stalk taught initiates to see decay as transformation. The Orphic cosmic egg cracked open the illusion of separation between creator and creation. Even Dionysus's wine-soaked frenzies revealed a startling truth: chaos isn't the enemy of order, but its twin engine. Together, these mysteries formed a constellation of wisdom, mapping paths to transcendence as diverse as the seekers who walked them. What's breathtaking is how these ancient experiments still resonate. Modern neuroscience confirms what Asclepian priests intuited: healing requires both scalpel and symbolism. The Thesmophoria's subversive sisterhood finds echoes in today's grassroots movements reclaiming feminine power. And that eerie bullroarer frequency, it's the same sonic range used in contemporary trauma therapy to unlock repressed memories. The Greeks didn't just worship their gods, they reverse-engineered transcendence through every available medium: geometry, hallucinogens, theater, even metallurgy. Their genius was recognizing that the sacred isn't a place or a being, but a perspective shift waiting to happen. As you scroll past this video, consider where else these patterns hide. Maybe it's the communal catharsis of a concert crowd mirroring Dionysian ecstasy. Perhaps it's the way farmers still bless seeds, continuing Demeter's ancient conversation with the soil. Or that shiver down your spine when you solve a complex equation. Pythagoras would call that the music of the spheres vibrating through you. Every time we seek meaning beyond the material, we're walking paths these mystery cults carved millennia ago. If these layers of history fascinate you, there's so much more to uncover. From Egyptian initiation rites to the shadowy practices of medieval alchemists, ancient wisdom never stops revealing its secrets. Hit subscribe and tap the bell. Your next journey into the forgotten corners of history starts now. And drop a comment below. Which of these hidden meanings surprised you most? The answers are never just in the past. They're waiting for whoever's willing to